Commander Day stood on the bridge of the Hammer of Dawn, watching the stars drift past the viewport. It was supposed to be a routine patrol, the kind he had done 100 times before. The outer colonies were quiet these days, and humanity had spread across 47 star systems without much trouble. They kept to themselves mostly, building their worlds and minding their own business. The alarm broke the silence. His communications officer looked up, confusion on her face. "Commander, we're picking up a distress signal. It's not human." Day walked over to her station. In 200 years of space travel, humanity had met exactly 3 alien species. All of them kept their distance. This was unusual. "Can you tell what kind of ship it is?" "No, sir. The signal is weak, but they're asking for help." He made his decision quickly. "Change course. Let's see who's out there." The ship they found was dying. It limped through space, trailing debris and atmosphere. Day had never seen anything like it. The hull was torn open in places, and scorch marks covered every surface. Whatever had attacked this vessel had meant to destroy it completely. Ambassador Nari arrived from Earth within 6 hours. She was humanity's chief diplomat, the woman who handled all contact with alien species. Day watched her shuttle dock with the damaged ship and waited. When she called back, her voice was shaking. "Day, you need to see this. Bring medical teams. Bring everyone you can." The inside of the alien ship was worse than the outside. Bodies lay everywhere. Some were still alive, barely. The aliens were tall and thin, with gray skin and large eyes. They looked at the humans with expressions that needed no translation: hope and desperation. Nari knelt beside one of them, using a translation device. The alien's name was impossible to pronounce, but the story it told was simple enough. His people were called the Velians. They were scholars and traders spread across 12 worlds. They had lived in peace for thousands of years. Then the Krath came. The Krath Dominion was an empire that controlled over 400 star systems. They were conquerors who took what they wanted. They had decided they wanted the Velian worlds for the resources beneath their surfaces. The Velians had no real military. They had tried to negotiate. They had called on their allies for help. No one came. Some allies surrendered to the Krath themselves. Others simply looked away. The Velians were dying, world by world, and no one in the galaxy would help them. So they had run. They had heard rumors about humans. Stories said humans were warriors, a species that had survived everything their world had thrown at them. The Velians had nowhere else to turn. Nari listened to all of this, then looked at Day. He saw tears in her eyes. "We have to help them," she said. "That's not our decision to make," Day replied, though he felt the same way. "This goes to the Council." Earth's United Council met in Geneva. The debate lasted for 3 days. Admiral Jin, the head of Earth's military forces, stood before them and argued for intervention. "We have a moral obligation," he said. "These people asked for help. We can't turn our backs on them." Counselor Hana disagreed. She was older, cautious. "We're talking about an empire with 400 worlds. We have 47. If we fight them, they could destroy us. We have to think about our own people first." General Tay, the head of military intelligence, presented his findings. "We've been watching the Krath for the past 2 days. They're powerful, but they're also arrogant. They've been observing our space. Their files call us primitives. They don't see us as a threat." "That's exactly my point," Hana said. "They could crush us." President Wu had been quiet throughout the debate. He was a small man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had led Earth through a plague and 2 civil wars. When he finally spoke, everyone listened. "The Velians came to us because no one else would help them. They're being exterminated, and the galaxy is letting it happen. Now they're asking us. If we say no, we're just like everyone else. We're telling them that power is all that matters, that the strong can do whatever they want to the weak." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "I didn't become president to make easy choices. I became president to make the right choices. The Velians asked for help. We don't abandon people who ask. We're going to fight." The room erupted in argument, but Wu raised his hand. I've made my decision. Admiral Jin, prepare our forces. We're going to war. When Nari told the Velian survivors, they wept. Their representative, the one she had spoken to first, grabbed her hands. You don't understand what you're facing. The Krath have never lost a war. They've conquered 400 worlds. You can't imagine their power. Commander Day, who was standing nearby, spoke up. They can't imagine ours either. The Velian looked at him with those large, desperate eyes. How many ships do you have? Enough, Day said. The Krath will send thousands. They'll burn your worlds like they burned ours. They'll kill everyone you love. How can you stand against that? Day thought about his daughter back on Earth. He thought about his wife, his friends, all the people living peaceful lives across human space. He thought about what the Krath would do to them if given the chance. Then he thought about these aliens, these scholars and traders who had done nothing wrong except exist on worlds someone else wanted. We'll find a way, he said. That's what humans do. We find a way. Admiral Jin began mobilizing forces across all human colonies. It was the largest military operation in human history. Ships were pulled from patrol duties. Reserves were called up. Factories began working around the clock to produce weapons and supplies. General Tai sent spy drones into Krath space. They needed to know what they were facing. The reports came back slowly, each one painting a clearer picture. The Krath were powerful, but they were also predictable. They hadn't fought a real war in 2 centuries. They were used to enemies who surrendered after the first battle. Colonel Hyun, who commanded the defense forces, gathered his officers. The Krath think we're primitives. They think we'll fold like everyone else. That's our advantage. They don't know what's coming. President Wu addressed the people of Earth and all the colonies. His speech was broadcast across every human world. We didn't ask for this war, but when someone asks for help, we answer. That's who we are. That's who we've always been. The Krath think they can prey on the weak. They're about to learn what happens when the weak have friends. The Velians watched all of this with wonder and fear. They had asked for help expecting to be turned away. Instead, they had awakened something in humanity. These strange warriors were preparing for war, and they were doing it for people they had just met. Nari sat with the Velian representative in the hospital where the survivors were recovering. Why? He asked her. Why would you risk everything for us? She thought about it for a moment. Because you asked, and because someone has to stand up to bullies. The galaxy might have forgotten that, but we haven't. In the darkness of space, far from Earth, the Krath Dominion received reports about the humans harboring Velian refugees. Warlord Vrax, who ruled the Dominion with absolute power, laughed when he heard. Another primitive species thinking they could defy him. He had crushed hundreds of worlds. What was one more? He sent orders to his fleet commanders. 200 warships would be more than enough. They would destroy one human colony as an example, then demand surrender. It was how it always went. The primitives would see the power of the Krath and submit. But Commander Day was ready. He had evacuated the colony of New Busan. Every civilian was gone. What remained was a trap, the largest military trap humanity had ever built. Hidden weapons platforms, mines that couldn't be detected, cyber warfare systems that could hijack enemy ships. The Krath fleet commander looked at the empty colony below and smiled. The humans had run away, just like all the others. He ordered his ships into attack formation, preparing to bombard the surface. This would be easy. That's when the mines exploded. They came from everywhere at once, thousands of them, hidden in the debris field around the planet. The Krath shields held against the first wave, but then the railgun platforms opened fire. They had been disguised as orbital stations, looking abandoned and harmless. Now they revealed their true purpose. Commander Day watched from his ship, positioned behind the moon. He could see everything on his screens. The Krath fleet was in chaos, trying to figure out where the attacks were coming from. They were used to enemies who fought in neat formations, following predictable patterns. Humanity didn't fight that way. Launch the fighter groups, he ordered. Small, fast ships shot out from hidden bays in the asteroid field. They moved like insects, swarming around the larger Krath vessels. Each one carried missiles designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Krath shield technology. General Tay's spy drones had done their job well. The Krath tried to organize a response, but their communications were being jammed. Officer Gina, working from a station on Mars, had hacked into their network. She was feeding them false orders, making them think attacks were coming from directions where nothing existed. Ships were firing on their own allies in the confusion. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, all 200 Krath ships were destroyed or captured. Day had lost 12 vessels, and he mourned every crew member who died. But the message had been sent. Humanity knew how to fight. The best part was that no Krath ship had escaped. No one had jumped away to warn the Dominion. Warlord Vrax would be wondering why his fleet had gone silent. He would be uncertain, maybe even worried. Good. Admiral Jin arrived at New Busan 2 days later. He walked through the captured Krath flagship with General Tay. The ship was massive, 3 times the size of the largest human vessel. But size didn't matter when you couldn't hit your targets. "We need to keep this victory quiet," Jin said. "Let them wonder what happened. Let them send more ships to investigate." "They will," Tay confirmed. "Our intelligence says Vrax doesn't like mysteries. He'll send a bigger force, probably 2,000 ships this time." Jin smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Then we'll be ready for them too. But this time, we're not waiting for them to come to us." Captain Sung was already in Krath space when the orders came through. His ship, the Silent Arrow, was designed for stealth. The Krath had good sensors, but human technology was better. He had been mapping their territory for weeks, and no one knew he was there. Now he had new orders. Don't just watch. Attack. His first target was a shipyard orbiting a Krath military world. It was building new warships to replace losses across the Empire. Sung brought his ship in close, so close he could see the workers moving through the windows. Then he launched his missiles. The shipyard exploded in a brilliant flash. Sung was already gone, jumping to his next target before the Krath even knew what hit them. Over the next 3 days, he destroyed 2 more shipyards and a supply depot. Each time he was like a ghost, there and gone before anyone could respond. Commander Yuna had a different mission. She was leading a strike force to the prison world of Velios, where the Krath had sent thousands of Velian prisoners. The Krath guards were used to easy duty. The prisoners were scholars, not warriors. They gave no trouble. Yuna's ships appeared without warning. Her Marines landed and overwhelmed the guards in minutes. The prisoners couldn't believe what was happening. Humans, the strange aliens who had agreed to help them, had come deep into enemy territory to free them. But Yuna didn't just free them. She armed them. She gave them weapons and basic training. Some of the Velians refused, clinging to their peaceful ways. But others, who had watched their families die, took the weapons eagerly. They would fight. Maybe they weren't warriors like the humans, but they could learn. Within a week, Velian resistance cells were operating on a dozen worlds. They sabotaged Krath facilities, freed more prisoners, and spread hope among the occupied populations. The Krath had to divert forces to deal with the uprisings, forces they needed elsewhere. Warlord Vrax sat in his palace, reading reports that made no sense. His 200-ship fleet had vanished. 3 shipyards were destroyed. A prison world had been liberated. And now he was hearing reports of a human fleet operating in Krath space, attacking supply lines. He called his military advisors together. "What is happening? Who are these humans?" His chief advisor pulled up what little information they had. "They're a young species, only been in space for 200 years. They have 47 colony worlds. We thought they were primitives." "Primitives don't destroy my fleets," Vrax shouted. "Primitives don't strike deep into our territory without being detected." "Sir, we may have underestimated them." Vrax stood up, his rage filling the room. "Then we stop underestimating them. Send the second fleet, 2,000 ships. I want this human space crushed. I want their colonies burned. I want them to remember what happens when they defy the Krath Dominion." The second fleet was massive. It carried the best commanders, the newest ships, and enough firepower to destroy entire planets. They jumped into human space expecting resistance. What they found was an empty system. Admiral Jin had evacuated 3 more colonies. He left behind nothing but automated defense platforms and a surprise. The Krath fleet spread out searching for targets. That's when Jin's forces appeared. 400 human ships against 2,000 Krath vessels. On paper, it was suicide. But humans didn't fight on paper. The battle that followed became known as the Battle of SciFiPrime's moon, though it was fought nowhere near the Krath homeworld. Jin had chosen the location carefully, a system with dense asteroid fields and a nearby star giving off heavy radiation. It played hell with sensors. Human ships used the asteroids as cover, appearing and disappearing. They had new weapons, things the Krath had never seen. Drones that could operate independently, coordinating attacks without needing constant orders. Kinetic weapons moving so fast they couldn't be stopped. Electronic warfare that blinded Krath sensors and disabled their weapons. The Krath tried to use their numbers, surrounding human ships and overwhelming them. But the humans had studied the Krath tactics. They knew every move before it happened. When the Krath tried to surround them, the humans would slip away and attack from a new direction. When the Krath bunched up for a coordinated strike, the humans would hit them with area effect weapons that punched through multiple ships at once. General Tay watched from the command ship, coordinating the battle. He had fought in the resource wars on Earth, had led troops through the worst fighting humanity had ever seen. This was different. This was humanity showing the galaxy what they could do when they were truly tested. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, over 1,800 Krath ships were destroyed. 153 surrendered, their commanders unable to believe what had happened. The humans had lost 67 ships. Tay ordered the prisoners brought aboard for questioning. He wanted to understand the enemy better. The Krath commanders were arrogant even in defeat. One of them looked at Tay with disgust. "You fight without honor. You use tricks and deception. You violate every convention of civilized warfare." Tay leaned forward. "Your mistake was assuming we'd fight your war. This is a human war now. We don't have conventions. We have victory." News of the defeat spread through the Krath Dominion faster than official reports could stop it. 2 fleets destroyed, shipyards burning, prison worlds liberated. And worst of all, the humans weren't even trying to defend their space anymore. They were attacking Krath territory directly. Warlord Vrax called an emergency meeting of his High Council. For the first time in his life, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not for himself, but for the Dominion. These humans were different from every enemy they had ever faced. "We need to negotiate," one of his advisors suggested. "No," Vrax said. "We show any weakness now, and the entire empire will collapse. Every conquered species will rise up. We have to crush the humans completely. Send orders to all fleets. I want every ship we have assembled. 50,000 vessels. We'll drown them in our numbers." President Wu received the intelligence report from Gina's spy network. The Krath were mobilizing everything they had. 50,000 ships. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. He called Admiral Jin. "Can we win?" Jin was quiet for a moment. "Yes, but it's going to cost us. The Krath are going to learn what total war means. They wanted to prey on the weak. Now they're going to find out what happens when you wake up Earth." The assembly of 50,000 Krath warships took 3 months. They gathered from across 400 worlds, pulling defense fleets from peaceful sectors. Warlord Vrax stood on the command deck of his flagship, looking at the fleet display. It was beautiful. Nothing in the galaxy could stand against this much power. His plan was simple. Jump directly into human space and overwhelm them. Hit every colony at once. Force them to spread their forces thin, then crush each group separately. It was how the Krath had conquered hundreds of worlds. It had never failed. What Vrax didn't know was that Captain Sung was watching. His stealth ship hung at the edge of the assembly point, recording everything. The fleet composition, the command structure, even the timing of their planned attack. He sent all of it back to Admiral Jin. Jin sat in his office on Mars, studying the data. 50,000 ships. He had maybe 5,000 under his command, counting everything from battleships to supply vessels. The numbers were impossible. On paper, humanity should surrender right now. "But we're not on paper," he said to General Tay. who sat across from him. No, we're not, Tay agreed. And the Krath are still fighting the last war. They think this is about ships and guns. They don't understand what we're really doing. Jin pulled up a map of human space. They're going to hit 5 colonies simultaneously. That's what their fleet composition suggests. They want us to defend, to spread out our forces. So we don't defend, Tay said. We've already evacuated those colonies. Every civilian is gone. What's left are automated defenses and traps. Meanwhile, we hit them where it hurts. Dr. Mira, the head of weapons development, joined the meeting through video link. She looked exhausted. Her teams had been working non-stop for months. The new production facilities are online. We can now produce 100 ships a week. They're not pretty, and they won't last long in a fight. But they don't need to. Drone ships, Jin said, nodding. Controlled by AI, packed with explosives. The Krath are used to fighting enemies who value their own lives. They're about to learn that not every ship needs a crew. Colonel Hyun was implementing the evacuation plans across human space. It was the largest movement of people in history. Entire colonies packed up and left within weeks. The Krath would find empty worlds, but that was the point. You can't threaten people who aren't there. The evacuees were scared. They didn't understand why they had to leave their homes. Hyun addressed them at every stop, explaining the plan. The Krath think our weakness is that we care about our people. They're right. That's why you're leaving. We won't let you become hostages, and when this is over, you'll have homes to return to. That's a promise. Commander Yuna was deep in Krath territory with the Velian resistance. They had grown from a few hundred fighters to thousands. The Velians were learning, adapting. They would never be soldiers like the humans, but they didn't need to be. They knew their own worlds, knew the Krath routines, knew where to strike for maximum effect. One of the Velian leaders, a scholar named Chris, sat with Yuna after a successful raid. We were always peaceful. We thought that was strength. But the Krath taught us that sometimes peace requires the willingness to fight. Fighting isn't about wanting violence, Yuna said. It's about protecting what you love. You're not becoming like the Krath. You're becoming strong enough to stop them. The Krath fleet finally jumped into human space. 50,000 ships appeared in 5 systems simultaneously. Alarms blared on every vessel as they prepared for battle. But the systems were empty. No defending fleets, just silent planets below. The fleet commanders were confused. Where were the humans? They sent scouts down to the colonies. What they found were ghost towns. Every human had vanished. The colonies were intact, but abandoned. That's when the traps activated. Each colony had been turned into a massive weapon. Hidden antimatter mines, automated gun platforms, gravity well generators that prevented ships from jumping away, and thousands of AI-controlled drone ships that swarmed out of underground hangars. The Krath fleet was caught completely off guard. They had expected desperate defenders, easy targets. Instead, they were fighting automated systems that didn't care about casualties. Drone ships rammed into Krath vessels, exploding on impact. Mines drifted through the formations, detonating and taking out multiple ships at once. In the first 6 hours, the Krath lost 15,000 ships. 15,000. And they still hadn't seen a single human pilot. Warlord Vrax watched the reports coming in, his face growing pale. This was impossible. No species fought like this. No species was willing to abandon their homes and turn them into traps. What kind of enemy was he fighting? Then the real attack began. While the Krath fleet was scattered across human space, dealing with automated defenses, Admiral Jin launched Operation Ghostblade. Human fleets appeared across Krath territory. Not at military targets. At civilian targets. They didn't attack the civilians. That wasn't humanity's way. Instead, they broadcast messages on every channel in every language. Officer Gina had prepared the broadcast carefully. People of the Krath Dominion, your leaders sent your armies to exterminate the innocent. Now those armies are dying in human space. Your leadership has failed you. Surrender, and you will be treated with mercy. Continue to support this war, and watch your empire burn. Then the human fleets hit the infrastructure, power stations, shipyards, military bases. They moved like lightning, striking and vanishing before the Krath could respond. Captain Sung led a raid on a major supply depot, destroying enough food and ammunition to supply 10 fleets. He was in and out in 30 minutes. The Krath population began to panic. For 600 years, war had been something that happened on distant worlds. Now it was coming home. People saw human ships in their own skies. They saw their military installations burning. The empire that had seemed invincible was bleeding. General Tay watched the psychological operation unfold. This was the key to everything. You didn't beat an empire by destroying every ship. You beat it by breaking its will to fight. The Krath had lived in peace and prosperity while their military conquered others. Now they were learning what war actually meant. The Krath fleet in human space was being systematically destroyed. With no planets to bombard, no civilians to threaten, they had lost their purpose. The admirals tried to regroup, to form a coordinated response. But Gina's cyber warfare teams had infiltrated their communications. Orders were changed. Ships were sent to empty systems. Friendly fire incidents increased. After 2 weeks, the surviving Krath fleet jumped out of human space. They had lost 23,000 ships and hadn't killed a single human civilian. The survivors were traumatized, broken. They had come expecting an easy victory and found hell instead. But the war wasn't over. Vrax still had forces. He pulled his fleets back to defend the core worlds, the heart of the Dominion. If he lost those, the Empire would collapse completely. He sent out a call to all Krath people. Total mobilization, every factory building weapons, every citizen supporting the war effort. President Wu addressed humanity in response. His face was grim. The Krath have learned nothing. They continue to fight. So we will continue to teach them. This ends when they surrender. Not before. The human fleets began pushing deeper into Krath space. But they weren't trying to conquer territory. They were destroying the Krath ability to wage war. Every shipyard they found was reduced to debris. Every supply line was cut. Every military base was attacked. Commander Day led a strike force to the Krath Military Academy on their third moon, the place where Krath officers trained. He could have destroyed it from orbit. Instead, he landed his Marines and gave the cadets a choice: surrender or fight. Most surrendered. They were young, barely adults. They had joined the military expecting glory. Now they faced humans who had come across the galaxy to stop their empire's cruelty. Day had the prisoners brought to the ships. He made them watch as the academy was demolished. "Tell your people what you saw here," he said. "Tell them this is what happens when you prey on the innocent. The galaxy has a protector now. And we don't forget." The freed Velian worlds were starting to rebuild. Commander Yuna helped establish new governments, ones based on mutual defense rather than pacifism. The Velians had learned a hard lesson. Peace was precious, but it had to be defended. Chris, the Velian resistance leader, asked Yuna a question that had been bothering him. "When this is over, what happens to the Krath people? Will you exterminate them like they tried to do to us?" Yuna shook her head. "No. We'll stop their military. We'll end their empire. But we're not murderers. The Krath people will live. They'll just live without the ability to threaten others." "That's the difference between you and them," Chris said quietly. "They fought to destroy. You fight to protect." The Krath economy was collapsing. With their military shattered and their infrastructure in ruins, trade had stopped. Worlds that had relied on the Empire's support were starving. Some outer colonies began declaring independence, seeing which way the wind was blowing. Warlord Vrax watched his empire crumble around him. He had ruled for 40 years, had conquered dozens of worlds. Now he was losing everything to a species he had dismissed as primitives. His advisors were telling him to negotiate, to surrender, but he couldn't. To surrender was to admit defeat, to admit that everything the Krath stood for was wrong. Instead, he made one last desperate decision. He would pull every remaining ship back to the homeworld. 30,000 vessels, all that remained of his once mighty fleet. He would make the humans pay for every meter of space. He would show them that the Krath would never give up. Admiral Jin received the intelligence and smiled grimly. He's doing exactly what I expected. He's making the homeworld into a fortress, all his forces in one place. The human fleet gathered at the edge of Krath space, just outside the homeworld system. Admiral Jin looked at the tactical display showing 30,000 enemy ships in defensive positions around Krathon. It was the largest concentration of military force in one place that humanity had ever faced. General Tay stood beside him on the bridge. They're expecting us to attack head-on. Standard siege tactics, grinding them down over months. That's what anyone else would do, Jin agreed. But we're not going to give them months. We're going to give them 72 hours. The plan was risky. Instead of a slow siege, humanity would hit Krathon with everything at once. Overwhelming force applied to multiple points simultaneously. The Krath would have to choose what to defend and what to sacrifice. And humans were very good at making their enemies make bad choices. Dr. Mira had been working on a new weapon for this exact moment. She called it the hammer. It was a kinetic impactor, a massive chunk of metal accelerated to nearly the speed of light. When it hit a shield, it didn't just damage it, it overloaded the entire defensive grid. One shot could disable the shields on a dozen ships. We have 30 of them, she told Jin through the video link. Use them wisely. They take 4 hours to recharge. Commander Day led the first wave. His task force of 200 ships jumped in at the outer edge of the Krath defensive perimeter. The enemy responded immediately, sending 5,000 ships to intercept. Exactly as planned. Day's ships didn't fight. They ran. Drew the Krath forces away from their defensive positions, leading them on a chase through the outer system. The Krath commanders thought they had the humans trapped. They were wrong. When the Krath fleet was far enough from the homeworld, Admiral Jin launched the real attack. 3 human fleets jumped in from different directions, hitting the now weakened defensive lines. The hammers fired, disabling shields across the Krath formation. Then, the human ships poured through the gaps. The battle became chaos, exactly what humans excelled at. The Krath tried to form defensive lines, but human ships were everywhere, attacking from unexpected angles. Captain Sung led his squadron through the debris of destroyed vessels, hitting command ships with precision strikes. Without their commanders, Krath formations fell apart. Commander Yuna brought the Velian resistance fighters in transport ships. They didn't have military vessels, but they had courage. Their targets were the orbital stations around Krathon. While the main battle raged, Velian teams boarded the stations and disabled them. They were reclaiming their dignity, showing the Krath that the victims could fight back. Officer Gina launched her cyber attack at the same moment. She had been mapping the Krath military network for months. Now she unleashed a virus that spread through every connected system. Weapons platforms fired on their own ships. Communication channels went silent. The Krath forces couldn't coordinate, couldn't call for help, couldn't even tell friend from enemy. On the surface of Krathon, people watched the sky light up with explosions. For the first time in 600 years, war had come to the Krath homeworld. They had always been the conquerors. Now they were the conquered. Warlord Vrax watched his fleet die from his palace. He had ruled with absolute power, had been treated like a god. Now he was just a man watching his world burn. One of his advisors ran into the command center. "Sir, we need to evacuate. The humans are pushing through our lines. Ground forces will be landing within hours." "No," Vrax said. "We fight to the last ship. The Krath do not surrender." "Sir, we've lost 20,000 ships already. If we don't surrender now, they'll destroy everything." Vrax turned to face him. And the advisor saw madness in his eyes. "Then let them destroy everything. The Krath Empire will not bow to primitives." But the Krath High Council had different ideas. They were politicians, not warriors. They could see the reality that Vrax refused to accept. The war was lost. Continuing would only mean more death. They sent a secret message to Admiral Jin, offering to negotiate. Jin's response was simple. "Surrender Vrax, end the fighting, or we keep coming." General Tay led the ground assault personally. His Marines landed at strategic points across Krathon. They weren't there to conquer the planet. They were there to capture the leadership. The Krath military had collapsed, but small pockets still fought. Tay's forces moved through them like they weren't even there. The palace where Vrax had ruled for 40 years was surrounded within 3 hours. Tay gave him one chance to surrender. Vrax refused, so the humans went in. The palace guards put up a fight, but they were ceremonial troops, used to standing at attention and looking impressive. They had never faced actual combat soldiers. It was over in 20 minutes. Tay found Vrax in his throne room, sitting in his chair, pretending he was still in control. "It's over," Tay said. "Surrender now, and you'll face trial. Keep fighting, and you die here." Vrax looked at him with hatred. "You think you've won? You're just one species. There are thousands of others in the galaxy. Someone will stop you." "We're not trying to conquer anyone," Tay replied. "We're stopping you. That's all we came to do. Now stand up and come with us." Commander Day's voice came through on the communication channel. "General, the Krath High Council is asking to speak with Admiral Jin. They want to surrender." Tay looked at Vrax. "Even your own people are smarter than you." The official surrender happened 3 hours later. The Krath High Council signed the treaty aboard Jin's flagship. The terms were harsh but fair. The Krath Dominion would be dissolved. All occupied worlds would be freed. War reparations would be paid to the victims. The Krath would keep their original 12 worlds, but they would be demilitarized and monitored. And Warlord Vrax would stand trial for war crimes, along with every commander who had participated in the genocide of the Velians and other species. President Wu addressed the galaxy from Earth. The message was broadcast on every channel, translated into every known language. The Krath Dominion preyed on the weak for 600 years. They believed power gave them the right to take what they wanted. Today, they learned differently. The Velians asked for help, and humanity answered. Let this be a lesson to any empire that thinks might makes right. There are those who will stand against you. There are those who will fight for justice. And we will not stop until the job is done. The battle for Krathon had lasted 72 hours, exactly as Jin had promised. The Krath had lost 28,000 ships. Humanity had lost 4,000. It was the bloodiest battle in human history, but it was also the most decisive. The war was over. Commander Day walked through the captured palace, looking at the monuments to Krath conquests. 600 years of victories, of other species ground under Krath boots. He thought about the Velian refugees who had limped into human space, desperate and dying. They had asked for help, and humanity had delivered something the galaxy had never seen before. Total war. Not for conquest, not for resources, but for justice. Captain Sung stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at Krathon below. His vessel had traveled deeper into enemy territory than any other. He had hit targets the enemy thought were safe. Now it was done. He could go home. Commander Yuna met with the Velian fighters who had helped take the orbital stations. They were crying, not from sadness but from relief. Their nightmare was over. Their people would be free. One of them, a young female named Hana, looked at Yuna with wonder. You came across the galaxy for us, for strangers. Why? Yuna thought about it. Because someone had to. Because the strong should protect the weak, not prey on them. And because you asked. Officer Gina was already working on the next phase. The Krath communication network was now under human control. She was using it to spread information about the surrender, about the terms of the treaty, about the new future. Some Krath were angry, others were relieved. Many were simply shocked that their invincible empire had fallen in less than 2 years. Dr. Mira received a message from President Wu. Her weapons had won the war. Now he wanted her to build something else, technologies to rebuild damaged worlds, to help the freed species recover. She smiled. This was the part of her job she preferred. Colonel Yoon was overseeing the return of evacuated colonists to their homes. The colonies had survived mostly intact. The Krath had never gotten past the automated defenses. Now people could go home, could restart their lives. A few buildings were damaged. No one had died. That was victory. Admiral Jin stood on the surface of Krathon, looking at the sunset. The war had cost humanity over 200,000 military personnel. Thousands more were wounded. 3 colonies had significant damage. The price of victory was high. But the alternative was unthinkable. To let the Velians die. To let the Krath continue their conquests. To show the galaxy that evil could win if it was strong enough. That wasn't acceptable. General Tay joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. They stood in silence for a while, watching the Krath sun set on the Krath Empire. Finally, Tay spoke. Do you think they'll remember this? The galaxy, I mean. Will they remember what we did here? Jin nodded slowly. They'll remember. They'll remember that when innocent people asked for help, someone answered. They'll remember that tyrants can be stopped. And they'll remember that humanity doesn't back down. The war trials would take months. Warlord Vrax and his commanders would face justice for their crimes. The galaxy would see that actions had consequences, that you couldn't exterminate entire species without someone holding you accountable. The Velian people sent a delegation to Earth. They wanted to thank humanity personally. Ambassador Nari met with them, the same Velians she had found dying on that refugee ship 20 months ago. They looked different now. Healthier, hopeful. How can we ever repay you? Their leader asked. Nari smiled. By rebuilding. By being who you always were. By showing the galaxy that kindness and knowledge matter. And by remembering that when you asked for help, someone came. The galaxy was changing. 47 other species had been freed from Krath rule. They looked at humanity with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Fear because humans had shown they could destroy a 400-world empire in less than 2 years. Gratitude because they had done it to protect the innocent. President Wu addressed the United Council one last time before his term ended. We didn't want this war, but we don't regret fighting it. The Velians are free. The Krath have been stopped, and the galaxy has learned that there are those who will stand against evil. That's worth the cost. 6 months had passed since the surrender on Krathon. The galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. The Krath Dominion, which had stood for 600 years, was gone. In its place were dozens of free worlds, each trying to figure out what came next. The war crimes trials were held on a neutral station orbiting a star between human and Velian space. The galaxy watched as Warlord Vrax and his commanders stood before judges from 20 different species. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings of orders to exterminate civilian populations, documents showing systematic genocide, testimonies from survivors who had watched their families die. Vrax showed no remorse. He stood before the court and declared that he had only been doing what was necessary to maintain order. That the strong had the right to rule the weak. That the Krath way was the only way. The judges were not impressed. Vrax was sentenced to life imprisonment on a prison colony. His commanders received similar sentences. They would spend the rest of their lives locked away, unable to hurt anyone else. Ambassador Nari attended every day of the trials. She wanted the victims to know that someone cared about justice. Many Velians came, needing to see their tormentors face consequences. One day, a young Velian male approached her after a session. "Thank you," he said simply. "My whole family died on our homeworld. I thought no one would ever care. But you came. Humanity came." Nari felt tears in her eyes. "We'll always come. That's a promise." The Treaty of New Earth was signed 3 months after the trials began. It was a massive document that took weeks to negotiate. The key points were simple but revolutionary for the galaxy. The Krath would be limited to their original 12 homeworlds. They could have defensive forces but no offensive military. Human observers would monitor them for the next 50 years. Any sign of aggression would be met with immediate response. All species that had been conquered by the Krath were free to govern themselves. The Krath would pay reparations, using the wealth they had stolen during 600 years of conquest. It would take generations, but the victims would be compensated. President Wu stood before the signing ceremony and spoke to the assembled representatives. This treaty isn't about revenge. It's about ensuring that what happened to the Velians never happens to anyone else. The strong have a responsibility to protect, not to prey. That's what this treaty means. The Velian Republic was rebuilding. Their 12 worlds were damaged but intact. Humanity sent engineers, supplies, and support. Dr. Mira personally oversaw the reconstruction of their capital city. The Velians wanted to build something new, a monument to survival. Commander Yuna visited the Velian homeworld and walked through streets being rebuilt. Children played in parks that had been battlegrounds just months before. The Velians had changed. They were still scholars and traders, but now they understood the need for defense. Chris, the resistance leader who had fought alongside Yuna, had become a leader in the new Velian government. He met with her in his office overlooking the city. "We're creating a military academy," he told her. "Not to conquer, not to threaten, but to defend. We asked for help once. We won't need to ask again." Yuna smiled. "That's good. But remember, if you ever do need help, we'll be there." "I know," Chris said. "That's what makes humanity different. You proved that strength can be used for good." The freed colonies were facing their own challenges. Some wanted to join together in a new federation. Others wanted independence. A few even asked to join the human colonies, seeing humanity as a protector. Captain Sung was assigned to help coordinate the transition. He traveled from world to world, meeting with new governments, helping establish trade routes, ensuring everyone had what they needed. It was very different from his wartime missions. He found he liked it better. On one world, a former Krath colony now governed by the native population, the leader asked him a question. "How do we know humanity won't become what the Krath were? You have the power. You have the weapons. What stops you from ruling us?" Sung thought carefully before answering. "Because that's not who we are. We fought to free you, not to own you. And if we ever forget that, I hope someone reminds us the way we reminded the Krath." Earth itself was changing. The war had thrust humanity into galactic politics whether they wanted it or not. 47 other species had joined with humanity in a defensive alliance. Not an empire, not a dominion. Just an agreement that they would protect each other. Admiral Jin became the first human representative to the Galactic Council. It was a new position. The Council had existed for thousands of years, but humans had never been invited. Now they had a seat, and everyone listened when Jin spoke. His first speech to the Council was short. "Humanity doesn't seek to lead the galaxy. We seek to live in peace. But we've proven that we'll fight when necessary. We fought for the Velians because it was right. We'll fight again if we must. Let that be known to anyone who thinks they can prey on the innocent." The response from other council members was mixed. Some saw humanity as heroes. Others saw them as a threat, a species too willing to use violence. A few saw opportunity, hoping to use human military power for their own goals. Jin made it clear that wouldn't work. "We're not mercenaries. We don't fight for profit or political gain. We fight for justice. That's the only reason we'll ever go to war again." General Tay retired from active military service. He had spent 30 years in uniform, had fought in 3 wars, and was tired. President Wu asked him to write a book about human military strategy to help other species understand how humanity fought. The book became a bestseller across the galaxy. It was called Victory Through Adaptation: The Human Way of War. In it, Tay explained that humanity's strength wasn't superior technology or numbers. It was the ability to learn, to adapt, to do whatever was necessary to win. One section became particularly famous. "The Krath thought they could intimidate us. They thought we'd fight by their rules. But humans don't have rules for war. We have objectives. Win, protect the innocent, stop the enemy. Everything else is just tactics. That's why we won." Dr. Mira redirected her genius toward peaceful purposes. The weapons factories were converted to produce medical equipment, construction tools, and technology for rebuilding. She led projects to help damaged worlds recover, to clean up the debris from battles, to heal the scars of war. One day, a young engineer asked her if she regretted building the weapons that had killed so many Krath soldiers. She thought about it seriously. "No," she finally said. "Those weapons saved the Velians. They stopped a genocide. Sometimes the only way to protect life is to be willing to take it. I wish it wasn't true, but it is." Colonel Hyun became the Minister of Defense for the United Earth Federation. His job was to make sure humanity stayed ready. The Krath were beaten, but the galaxy was a dangerous place. Other threats existed. Humanity needed to be prepared. But he insisted on one thing. The military would always be defensive. No offensive wars, no conquest, no expansion through force. We fight when someone needs help, he told his officers. That's our mission. Nothing more, nothing less. Commander Day took a teaching position at the new Interstellar Military Academy on New Busan. Students came from dozens of species to learn from the humans who had defeated the Krath. Day taught them tactics, but also philosophy. War is terrible, he told his students. It should always be the last option. But sometimes, it's the only option. When innocent people are dying, when tyrants are rising, when no one else will act, someone has to stand up. That's what we did for the Velians. That's what we'll do again if needed. Officer Gina established the Interstellar Intelligence Network. It was a cooperation between humanity and allied species, sharing information about potential threats. Never again would they be caught off guard. Never again would a species be able to commit genocide while the galaxy looked away. The network had strict rules. Information was used for defense only. No spying on allies, no political manipulation, just early warning about threats. It was a new concept for the galaxy, but it worked. Commander Yuna continued to serve in the military, now as Supreme Commander of the Allied Defense Forces. It was a multinational command, with officers from dozens of species. They trained together, planned together, prepared for future threats together. Her philosophy was simple. We won the war. Now we have to win the peace. That's harder, but it's more important. The Krath worlds were struggling. Their empire was gone. Their military was disbanded. They had to learn to live as equals rather than masters. Some adapted. Others clung to the old ways, dreaming of revenge. Human observers reported on the situation regularly. Most Krath civilians wanted peace. They were tired of war, tired of fear. A new generation was growing up without the propaganda of empire. They might become something better. But a minority still followed the old ways. They plotted in secret, planning a return to power. Gina's intelligence network watched them carefully. If they became a threat, humanity would respond. But for now, they were just angry voices, powerless and isolated. President Wu served 2 more terms, then retired. His final speech was given from the memorial on New Busan, the site of the first battle against the Krath. We were asked for help, he said, and we gave it. That's what I'm most proud of. Not the victories, not the power we gained, but the fact that when innocent people were dying, we didn't look away. We acted. That's what humanity should always be. The species that acts when others won't. Ambassador Nari stood on the Velian homeworld at the unveiling of a memorial. It showed the moment the first Velian refugee ship arrived in human space. The inscription was in both Velian and human languages. They were strangers to us. We were nothing to them. Yet, when we pleaded for help in our darkest hour, they brought total war to our enemies and total peace to our people. This is humanity's promise. Ask, and they will answer. Stand with them, and they will stand with you. Oppose them, and they will end you. Beneath it was a phrase that had become famous across the galaxy. 3 simple words that captured everything humanity had proven during the war. Humanity, fuck yeah. The phrase didn't translate well into most languages, but everyone understood the meaning. Humanity was special, not because they were stronger or smarter, but because when faced with injustice, they fought. When asked for help, they came. When others gave up, they kept going. The war had lasted 18 months. The Krath Dominion, which had stood for 600 years, was gone. The Velian Republic, which had nearly been extinguished, was thriving. 47 other species were free. And humanity had proven something to the galaxy, something important. Power could be used for good. Strength could protect the weak. And justice still mattered. 10 years later, a new crisis arose on the far side of the galaxy. A species called the Korath was attacking its neighbors, using the same tactics the Krath had used. The victim sent out a call for help. Admiral Jin, now retired but still influential, received the message. He brought it to the United Council. The debate was shorter this time. Everyone remembered the Velians. Everyone knew what happened when good people did nothing. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would help. The Allied Defense Forces would deploy. The lesson would be taught again. Because the galaxy had learned something. There was a line you didn't cross. There were protectors who would come. And those protectors were humans. They pleaded for help. Humanity brought total war. And when the war ended, they brought peace that would last for generations. The galaxy was safer because humanity had proven one fundamental truth. Evil could be stopped. Tyrants could be beaten. And the innocent would always have defenders. That was humanity's gift to the stars. Not technology, not weapons, not empire. Just the promise that when someone asked for help, they would answer. Every single time. And they always kept their promises. Commander Day returned to Earth and saw his daughter for the first time in 18 months. She ran to him, and he held her tight. This was what he had fought for. Not glory, not conquest, just the chance for people to live their lives in peace. The war was over. Humanity had brought total war to the Krath Dominion, and in doing so, they had brought peace to everyone else. That makes our job easier, Tay said. Or much harder, Jin replied. But either way, this ends at Krathon. The Velians will be free, and the galaxy will learn that tyrants have a limit. That limit is us. The human fleet began its final advance. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon system converged on one target. The Krath homeworld. This would be the battle that ended the war. Wu nodded. Then let's show them. The Velians asked for help. We're going to give it to them. And we're going to make sure the Krath never threaten anyone again. The word went out across all human colonies. This was it. Total war. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource would be turned toward victory. Humanity was going all in. When the Krath fleet arrived, D was waiting. They sent a message demanding surrender. He sent back 3 words. Come and take it. The battle was about to begin.